And welcome to another episode of the Illinicast. I believe this is episode 38. That's crazy. We appreciate all the growth that we've had on the channel. There's not a lot of Illinois content out there, so we're just trying to spread the word, spread the name. Moving forward, there's going to be a big, you know, power two movement, and we just kind of don't want Illinois to be left behind. So, what I mean by saying this random statement off the top of my head is if you are an Illini fan, please, if you don't mind, share this over to your group chat from college. Share it to whoever you think might be interested in Illinois content because that's the only way this channel grows. This channel will grow. We need some subscribers. The YouTube algorithm kicks in. So if you don't mind, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button if you like this content. If you don't like this content, still hit the like button, still hit the subscribe button. That'd be much appreciated. You can find the Illinicast on your favorite podcast channels, whatever it is you might like. You can find us there at Illinicast. Again, we try to be your go-to destination for Illinois sports, mainly basketball and football. Today's episode, we're going to kind of talk a little bit about football. I know it's been a while. Unfortunately, the Illinois football season has come to a conclusion. A disappointing conclusion, and there's not a bowl to discuss, but there's something, dare I say, more exciting going on. It's transfer portal season, and transfer portal season has really changed the outlook of what college football is, and you can kind of see it going on right now. All your social media, it's Nebraska this, Ohio State that. We're going to talk about all of that later. I figured we'd kick it off and talk a little bit about Illinois football first. We all know Reggie Love left earlier. I think even before he announced, before the transfer portal opened, he announced that he was leaving. He hasn't been replaced. I don't know if he's going to be. Again, he was a good Big Ten running back, but in my opinion, the running back room at Illinois is probably the strongest one that we have. And I just don't know if we have the carries available to an attractive option coming in from another school, especially with Caden Fagan, Aiden Lawfrey, Josh McCray still there. We just have a lot of young guys who with a lot of upside, and assuming they can stay healthy, I just think the running back room is probably the one room we don't have to worry about. The law firm have both officially announced that they're going to be leaving for the NFL draft. Johnny Newton is projected to be a top 10, top 15 pick, depending on where you look. Keith Randolph, he's got a third to fourth round projection. So, they're going to move on. I totally understand. Do I wish Keith would stick around another year longer? Sure. But, I know when you're 23, 24 years old, sometimes you're just ready to move on and do something else. And if he knows he's going to be on an NFL team next year, maybe it's just time to, take that extra step. In his place, we've brought in Clay Patterson from Yale, I believe. He's a defensive lineman. He was one of the first commits that we had from the transfer portal season. He was an All-American. And from what I've read, again, I don't do any scouting myself. I don't watch videos myself. It's basically I get feedback. I have a couple people inside the athletic department that I talk to every now and then. And then I have some athletic directors who I became friends with through my other career. Let's put it that way. And so Patterson, apparently, he has a all Big Ten ceiling, depending on if this coach can get them there or not. He's not Johnny Newton. I don't know if we're ever going to see another Johnny Newton in the next 10, 20 years. So set your expectations. But this is a guy who the Big Ten staff is super confident can come slide right in and become a solid defensive lineman, which is kind of what we need right now. Because I didn't even mention Seth McConnell. He is gone as well. So we have a lot of replacing to do at that defensive line. We did just also get a commit this past week from Aniche Sledge. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. If I'm not, and you're watching Aniche, I'm so sorry. I'll work on that. But he's a former 3-star recruit from Auburn. And from the scouting report I got from him, and I think I read a little tidbit from Jeremy Warner from 24/7, he's a guy who Auburn didn't think that they'd really have time for on the field because he was just rated a 3-star, and these SEC schools are kind of used to, uh, running out the 4 or 5 star guys, but he has considerably grown in his 2 years off the field, and he's a guy that they project could be an impact player in about 2 years. So he's someone who is I'm somewhat excited to see, and someone who could be one of those guys on the defensive line. The main guy we're kind of waiting on right now is Isaiah Washington. Obviously, if he stays one more year, he's going to basically obliterate every Illinois wide receiver record that we have. The feedback I've gotten from what I've been told privately is that he's gotten that second and third round grade. And if that's the case, I think it's going to be very hard to keep him. And if that's the case, I would also just tell him, go ahead and make the leap. But should he make that leap, then Illinois is going to basically be in a dire need to find a replacement for him in that transfer portal. So that's something to kind of wait and see on. You figure Isaiah's going to at least go through the draft process, try to, talk to the right teams and see what he can do. And then ultimately it's going to be up to Brett Bielema, Illinois, and Icon, Illinois' NIL initiative, to see if we can come up with the sort of package to keep Isaiah Washington in the blue and orange. From what I'm gathering, Chase Canada, a cornerback, is going to be a 3-star cornerback, is going to be making an announcement on Saturday, and he looks like the crystal balls are all favoring Illinois. Cornerback is another room which is going to need a little upgrade because one of our starters, Taz Nicholson, as some of you know, entered the transfer portal and recently announced his commitment to Ole Miss. Now, Taz, he's been a starter for a couple of years now, and he's a good cornerback, but he more than doubled the second highest defensive back in the Big Ten in penalties. There was a lot of times where it seemed the opposing team just knew to kind of launch it in his direction, and Taz would make some sort of mistake, and there'd be an automatic 15 yards. We all remember the Northwestern game. Did he spit on the player? The refs say he did, and he got ejected from the game. He insists that he didn't. But I think Illinois fans were just kind of ready to move on and see who else we have in that cornerback room. Brett and the staff, they've been recruiting the hell out of that room, just based on Devin Witherspoon, Quan Martin, Sidney Brown, using those stories. And so now it's going to be a matter of, we're going to have to bring in a transfer for one of those starting cornerback slots. But, at the same time, you've been recruiting for 2 years now. Let's have one of those younger guys be able to slide in and do what a Brett Bielema program essentially does. Not the most exciting names, I know. And, very shortly I'm going to bring on a very special guest, and we're going to be talking about names that are kind of household to the modern college football fan. But, that's just kind of where Illinois lies in all of this right now. Most of our NIL funds are directed towards the basketball program. Some will say, that's well deserved. Our basketball program has had more historic success. I hope things change. I think, we have a very good foundational coach, and I hope that, Illinois fans and alumni start buying in. Again, we had a special episode with Kathleen Kennedy from Icon, the CEO of Icon, where we kind of talked about how you can help with as little as $25 a month to kind of start building a little, this is probably a word that no one's going to like me saying, but bankroll, to try to be able to recruit the 4 or 5 stars that some of the other guys that we're going to be talking about later are recruiting. So if you wish Illinois was involved with some of the names we're about to talk about, again, tell your friends, try to support the program, be there for the football games, not just basketball. I know basketball is where we're, historically better, but I really think that this football team has potential. We're moving into a brand new Big Ten, which, is going to be arguably the most exciting league moving forward. And we don't want Illinois to be forgotten about. So get your friends together and, support the program in whatever ways. Not everyone has money, and I totally understand that. But, it's just give what you can give, whether that's through financial means or, going, watching on TV, getting our TV ratings up, whatever it might take. But that's enough of my rant. Now I'm going to be bringing on the world famous, dare I say, Big Ten Ted, one of the hardest working men I've been had a pleasure of seeing over the last year as I'm starting to work on this field. Thanks for coming on, Big Ten Ted, or can I just call you Ted?
Just Ted works. Yeah, it's great to be on here. It's great, like you kind of said earlier, it's great to have kind of an Illinois voice where there's maybe not as much. You got Michigan podcasts till the sun doesn't shine anymore, Ohio State and everything else. And this kind of goes back to being a part of the Big Banter network that you guys are in, where there's shows and podcasts for every fan, from Illinois to your buddies across the state at Northwestern to now in 2024 from sea to shining sea. So it's great to have this type of content that you guys are putting out.
Before we start, I advise all my followers, anyone who's watching this video, if you've not seen this gentleman before, Big Ten Ten, find him on YouTube. He's thrown out high quality content almost every day, it seems like, and he's one of the few content providers which I've noticed has also focused on the 4 new schools coming in next year. So for a guy like me who's trying to learn about our new neighbors to the west, I've always been, I think Ted sees me in his chats on Friday nights. Every now and then I try to throw him a question. He's on a local radio station, so please give him a follow. And by the time the show is over, hopefully you'll be able to see that Mr. Ted knows exactly what he's talking about. But okay, Ted, let's start off talking about, again, we're going to kind of go over some of the big stories going on in the transfer portal, at least when it comes to Big Ten teams. I have a smaller focus on Illinois, but you can probably provide a little broader overview, if that's fair to say.
Yeah, a little bit broader. You kind of mentioned, first of all, you kind of mentioned Illinois. Of course, they're trying to stack back up on the defensive line, and that's where they went immediately right away, like they needed to. Like even this past year for the Illini, it was tough. You could see back there in the back in the secondary, right after losing Brown, after losing Witherspoon, and all those guys took a hit back there. Now this year, it's going to be those guys on the defensive line. But as I look across this conference as a whole, as it pertains to transfer portal season, and first of all, first thing I want to say is remember in college football when after Thanksgiving weekend we would take 2 or 3 weeks off and there'd be no news at all, maybe a little bit of recruiting, because signing day used to be the first Tuesday in February. Maybe you'd see a little bit of recruiting news. But now it is immediately after these conference championship games and even after those Thanksgiving weekend rivalry games, kids hitting the portal, recruiting happens immediately, and now you got early signing day. But as we kind of look across the Big Ten, I think a lot of teams right now getting a lot more aggressive because I think they know what's about to happen out west. Look at what Oregon's been able to do on the offensive side. Look at what Washington, look at what USC. I know the Trojans had a little bit of a down year, but you've probably got the best offensive mind and developer of quarterbacks on the other on that sideline in Lincoln Riley. This thing's about to change. I'm not saying these teams are going to come in here and they're going to get all these great transfer quarterbacks and they're going to light it up and Big Ten teams are going to be left behind the current footprint. That's not what's going to happen. I always thought teams needed to meet in the middle. Teams like in Illinois, maybe like in Iowa, need to get maybe more dynamic on the offensive side. Teams out west maybe need to get a little bit tougher, need to get a little bit beefier in the interior, on the lines. And I think you're seeing that in the transfer portal really so far. But I think the big headlines right now, of course, is quarterback, right? You've got 3 teams out west that are losing either Heisman Trophy winner or Heisman Trophy finalists. And those are some of the 3 premier destinations down in SoCal and, of course, in the Pacific Northwest with Oregon and Washington. Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr., former Indiana Hoosier, kind of on their way out. And then Nebraska, man. Oh, man, it is heating up in Husker Town. I know we might dive into that a little bit more, but it's getting crazy down there. Matt Rule is doing a great job, but I'll tell you what, they got some decisions to make, and they're putting their chips into the center of the table, not just any table, the Raiola family table.
Let's just go ahead and start with
Sure.
Nebraska
Yeah.
because I think that is at least at the moment the biggest story
Yeah.
going on. Now we are recording this essentially an hour and a half after it's kind of been announced that Kyle McCord has decided to move on from Nebraska. That's not going to be an opportunity that he's going to be pursuing moving forward. So you know, common wisdom would kind of tell you that maybe Nebraska has gotten word from the Raiola family that the five-star quarterback is going to be enrolling there, and Kyle McCord, may not want to battle for that position this year. There may be a promise. Ted, your thoughts?
Yes, and I do have thoughts. I have many thoughts. I could ramble on this for a long time because this has many layers to the onion, and you keep on peeling them back, and you find something new. It seems like ever since the news, where multiple recruiting experts, multiple recruiting services said, "Yeah, we're crystal balling Dylan Raiola now to Nebraska." Ever since that happened, it seems like something new happens every single day. And oh, by the way, Donovan Raiola, the uncle and current offensive line coach, just got what, an extension, about a 58% raise. So
Very
that's
convenient.
kind of that kind of plays into it just a little bit as well. So I thought, because remember, Kyle McCord was crystal balled to go to Nebraska. It seemed like that's the way things were going. About a week ish before this Dylan Raiola news went down. And then this news kind of came up. Things kind of changed around at Georgia. Remember, he was originally committed to Ohio State last summer, decommitted, and then Nebraska was in it, right? He visited Nebraska sometime in the spring, and then he ended up going to Georgia. Moves down to Georgia to play high school football, and I believe it's the third different state that he played high school football in. Originally from Arizona, I think there was somewhere else before that as well. So then you get Dylan Raiola, and he's actually going to be visiting on campus this weekend at Nebraska. And a lot of people say, you've got Carson back coming back at Georgia. Maybe he didn't think that was going to happen. A little bit more competition maybe in the room. That's been a buzzword as it pertains to Dylan Raiola. So I'm coming in. Okay, Kyle McCord's got 1 year left of eligibility. You've got Dylan Raiola. Perfect. Okay, Dylan Raiola has a year to learn the system, right? We saw it out west at UCLA. What happens when you throw Dante Moore into the fire right away? Injuries, got benched, didn't exactly do well. I know different kids can react a little bit differently coming out of high school, but I thought it was a really good situation. But then we hear the news today, and the light bulb went on. The light bulb went on. Dylan Raiola, I think he wants to play right away. And he wants to be at a school where they are all in and recognize his talent. Here's the thing, and that's where I think we're at with Nebraska. I think he's the guy, right? And I think Kyle McCord said, maybe the reason I left Ohio State is because Ryan Day said, yeah, we're going to have an open competition. We're going to look into the portal. We're going to look at maybe some options. If you want to come back and compete, that's great, but that's what we're going to do. Kyle McCord said, peace out. And then he thought Nebraska is a place that he could kind of come in. But then at the last minute, in comes Dylan Raiola. And he's ultra talented. You watch his tape from his junior year, from his senior year, even further back than that. This kid is as good of even his freshman year when he's still a teenager. He will be as good of a quarterback Nebraska has had possibly ever in terms of throwing the football. They've had some good running quarterbacks. The Martinez kids, of course, you got to go back to guys like Eric Crouch, Scott Frost, Tommy Frazier, etc. So they are pushing their chips, like I said, into the middle of the table. I believe it's a risky move, but it certainly could pay off, and it's certainly an upgrade from Heinrich Harburg. It's certainly an upgrade from Jeff Sims. Chubba Purdy was probably the best of them all. I still think it's an upgrade over him. But man, you got to give credit to Matt Rule if this is indeed how this thing shakes out for being the risk taker and doing what he needs to do to get the number one quarterback in the country to come to, of all places, Lincoln, Nebraska.
So let me ask you, because that was actually going to be one of my follow-up questions. This is absolutely a huge risk.
Yep.
If you're Matt Rule, now you have a guy who seemingly was ready to commit to you. He's proven on the college football field in the Big Ten that he
Yep.
is, let's just say, a good quarterback. Yeah, he's not C.J. Stroud, he's not Justin Fields, But you look at his numbers, Kyle McCord has proven that he can play at a Power Five level, above average.
Yep.
Nebraska, as you kind of alluded to, had arguably the worst quarterbacks room in the country last year. They were
Mm-hmm.
led by a top 10 defense where if they even had an average quarterback, they would be going bowling right now. They'd be preparing for a bowl game. Now, obviously, you've proven that you've watched more Dylan Raiola game tape than I have. But as someone who hasn't watched the tape, for me, I wonder, like, to me, would I rather have when I'm in this transition phase, like, would I rather have, a former 4-star Kyle McCord who I know can compete against the better teams in the country, in hand starting, it'll be his second year. So, you figure, his sophomore year, he kind of got some of the jitters out. You kind of project a little improvement moving forward. Or do you take the legacy quarterback, the 5-star, as you said, the number one quarterback recruit in the country, and kind of play that risk, moving forward to see if he's that guy who can really elevate that program like to much higher levels?
I don't envy this decision from Matt Rule. I don't. This is tough. This is a tough one because we don't know, obviously, the behind the scenes details, but we can kind of put the puzzle pieces together. We can read the tea leaves. Okay? Oh, Dylan Raiola is visiting. Dylan Raiola is all of a sudden crystal ball, and now all of a sudden Kyle McCord is gone. Matt Rule's, I think, doing what he has to do to get the top quarterback in the country. Now, in terms of the decision, you got a great defense back there, and you got a good amount of guys, at least half of the guys returning. Nash Hutmaker and Ty Robinson are back in the middle. They played a lot of young guys as well. Matt Rule's done a really good job recruiting in a short period of time. So the defense, and you got one of the best coordinators in the country, in Tony White. USC was possibly after him before they hired DeAnton Lind out of UCLA. This is because if Kyle McCord is playing on this team at Nebraska this year, I think they're in the Big Ten championship game. I really do. They beat Iowa. They beat Minnesota. You go down the list. They beat Maryland. Some of these teams, you combine Kyle McCord with the Nebraska defense, and I still think you get to that point. But here's what this tells me. If it were me, I saw Kyle McCord nearly lead Ohio State to an undefeated season, 37 yards away. They were moving the ball in that final drive against Michigan. And look, I know it's not what Ohio State is maybe used to. It's not maybe what they're expecting. And you would take a drop down, of course, in terms of your weapons, your skill players around you. You go anywhere else except for Ohio State, maybe Washington as well this year, you're going to take a step down. But Nebraska doesn't need, that's the difference between a place like Nebraska and a place like Ohio State. Nebraska doesn't need a guy that puts up 3,000 yards and 30 touchdowns. They would love a game manager. Hold on to the football. That's all we need in Lincoln, Nebraska. And you have an experienced commodity out there. That's, to me, that is hard to pass up. But I can also see it from Matt Rule's perspective. Is you could have Dylan Raiola for 3 years. If Nebraska has goals to make the playoff, if Nebraska has goals to get to the Big Ten title game, and who knows from there? I know they haven't been to a bowl game in a lot of years. I know they've had bad years, and it's crazy enough, right? People look at you weird when they say, well, this team could be a championship level team. But Matt Rule, I watched him on Pat McAfee this week, and I'm like, this guy gets it. He knows where he wants to go. And picking up Dylan Raiola, I believe, and investing in him, I believe is the direction that he wants to go right now. And I don't blame him. Like I said at the top of this, it's a tough decision. If it were me, I'd maybe go with the proven commodity that you kind of put in. Nebraska had a lot of injuries, offensive line, skill positions. So that kind of plays into kind of their 5-7 record as well. But I would go with the proven commodity, maybe. I try to make them both work. Now, one thing you also have to remember that happened today is they had a high 3-star, low 4-star quarterback in Daniel Kalen out of the Omaha area, Bellevue West, a really good program out there in Nebraska that they were pretty excited about. I forgot which service, one of the 3 services bumped him up to a 4-star, I think before his high school season started. So they were really high on him. They really liked him. A McCord to Kalen transition possibly could have worked as well. And now Daniel Kalen's taking a visit to Michigan State. So you're losing out on Kyle. You're losing out on Kalen. These are the risks I think that Matt Rule needs to take if he wants to get Nebraska to that very next level. Not saying that they couldn't get to a similar level with a Kyle McCord or a Daniel Kalen, but this is something I know there's a lot of opinions and there's a lot of kind of people going back and forth on this subject, and it's fun to listen to and fun to hear. Let's see what happens a year down the road. Wherever Kyle McCord ends up, I know Rutgers has maybe been thrown out there. Former Minnesota quarterback Ethan Kaliakmanis is visiting there this weekend as well. But I want to see what happens 1 year down the road, right, with Dylan Raiola. This thing might not be all sunshine and rainbows. I mentioned Dante Moore at the beginning of the segment. 5-star, can't-miss guy out of the Detroit area. He was committed to Oregon. Kenny Dillingham makes his way down south to Arizona State. Now he flips to UCLA. He could be headed back to Oregon, by the way. That's just an example of Nebraska fans. Okay, that's just an example of what we could maybe see. If it's Raiola, man, watch out for 2025. Watch out for 2026. Maybe this is Rule putting a 3-year plan together. We've got a 3-year goal to get to the playoff. We've got a 3-year goal to get to the Big Ten title game. This is a big decision. This is going to be one of those decisions that we look back on multiple years from now. Is Matt Rule still at Nebraska? Because if this whiffs, he could be gone in 2 years. He could be gone in 3 years. If this connects, he's the greatest coach on earth. Like, there is no middle ground, right, for this. There is, that's the way I see it. There's no 7-5. There's no, it's, to me, it's like 10 wins or 5 or 6. It's home run or strikeout. It appears with this move, and they're hoping they certainly hit a home run.
That's kind of how I see it as well. It's I think what pushed it to the Raiola side is the fact that he's a legacy quarterback.
Yep.
And it's hard, you know as well as anybody that the Nebraska fan base is as passionate and as rabid as there is, period. So with, his family having, parts of the program named after them, Kyle McCord could come in and be a good quarterback, and he could lead you to 9 wins. He could lead you to 10 wins. But if Dylan Raiola continued to go down to Georgia and he won a national championship down there, he won a Heisman down there, there's going to be a lot of, there's going to be a lot of Husker fans who will still be angry at Rule for not having that 5-star gift wrap to you and not going with him. So I think ultimately, I think I would have sided with you. I probably would have rather taken McCord and then transitioned him to Kalen. But the legacy factor, it's got to matter because a lot of these older Husker fans, saw his dad. They know his uncle. So I think that's, it's going to be interesting to watch. I texted a couple Nebraska folks and because I was just curious about, wait, McCord, Raiola, what's going on there? And I just got like a 3-sentence response back saying the donors are all in on Rule. They like what they saw in that first year, and they basically opened up the bank for him, and you can kind of see it. Like they're involved with Julian Fleming, who we haven't even talked about. Another top-rated wide receiver out of Nebraska, or out of he's coming from Ohio State. So I don't know.
Watch out for him, though. Watch out for him now because this Kyle McCord thing fell through. Not saying he won't go to Nebraska because he still could. But, from my point of view, from the Big Ten point of view, I'm happy if I know this is a really weird connection, but it is a connection. As a Penn State fan, Okay, if I'm a Penn State fan, I'm loving Dylan Raiola right now because Julian Fleming visited Penn State. I think it was at the Penn State basketball game this weekend. And they need wide receivers to really take that next step up to get to the Big Ten title scenario. That's the thing about this transfer portal. There's a lot of ifs and then. There's a lot of last minute decisions. Oh, well, now you have your quarterback. Well, now I'm going to go somewhere else. Wait, I was going to bring Julian Fleming with me. Oh, well, he's not going to Nebraska. Now I'm going to Penn State. Right. So there's a lot of dominoes that fall in a certain direction that kind of veer off in another direction. So there's a potential that Kyle McCord, Daniel Kalen, and Julian Fleming could all not be in Lincoln, Nebraska, just with one swoop of the Dylan Raiola recruitment right now.
Speaking of dominoes, I feel like the biggest domino yet to fall is that Ohio State quarterback position. We
Yep.
talked a little bit about Kyle McCord moving on. What kind of names have you heard? Who do you think might be a good fit? Because, I mean, if you think about it, with the wide receiver recruiting classes they have every single year, you have to imagine that once that spot opened up, even quarterbacks who weren't planning on entering the transfer portal may have all of a sudden, their ears perked up a little bit. And, we just had, a gentleman go on the transfer portal today who you might be bringing up. Like, it's
Yep.
like, what have you heard about the Buckeyes quarterback situation?
Well, you kind of, yeah, I said that the exact same thing early in the week. There's two, and they're open this year. There's two quarterback positions. There's two schools where when they open up, heads turn. Not only of kids that are in the transfer portal, but are kids that haven't declared to go into the transfer portal yet. It's USC, like look at their track record that Lincoln Riley had going all the way back to Oklahoma. And it's Ohio State. I know Ohio State quarterbacks haven't panned out especially well at the NFL level. Justin Fields is getting better. I know you guys will love to hear that. but when I look at Ohio State, you look at their track record and the offense, and you mentioned the wide receivers that they play with right last season. Ohio State signed 3 of the top 5 wide receivers in last year's recruiting class. So just because Marvin Harrison leaves, just because Emeka Buka leaves and Julian Fleming leaves, doesn't mean that they're not going to be loaded next season. So Ohio State was one of those positions. Now here's kind of how it went. Okay, we kind of talked about how maybe it happened with Kyle McCord and Ryan Day. And then the next domino was, let me go back a little bit. Last weekend, Riley Leonard, the quarterback from Duke, he visits Notre Dame. It looks like he's going to commit, crystal ball, that kind of thing. And then Ohio State gets involved at the last minute. And that's, I think, people were kind of waiting. He was crystal balled after that visit weekend. What's he waiting for? Right? A lot of thing when you get a really good visit at the transfers, they usually commit afterwards. But Ohio State kind of got into the mix. Didn't work out. Of course, Riley Leonard ends up going to Notre Dame. Cam Ward has been kind of thrown out there as well, but Cam Ward did not reciprocate, right, what Ohio State wanted. And that was, I know it was kind of mentioned by some people out there. That was my original prediction, right, that I put out on Twitter a week and a half or so back. Boy, a lot has happened in a week and a half. But yeah, they just never seem to match. It seems like Cam Ward's going to go down south somewhere like a Miami or an FSU. I know Washington was mentioned, but I don't know if that's happening anymore. He seems like he's going down south there into the ACC. So now the big question, what happens next at Ohio State? What happens next? Okay, it seemed like they wanted a competition. They wanted to go into the portal to make their quarterback position better, or at the very least, maybe a guy that fits the Buckeye offense and what they really want to do and how they want to open it up a little bit more. Because during the season, I think Ryan Day was a little bit frustrated that he could not open it up as much as he could with Justin Fields, as much as he could with C.J. Stroud. Kyle McCord did not have that running ability, the mobility that they like to have at Ohio State, going back to guys like J.T. Barrett, right, as well, going back to the Urban Meyer era. I think that kind of Ryan was a little bit frustrated that he had to play Big Ten football, so to speak, run the ball and play great defense. So his play calling maybe affected that. So now you got Devin Brown in there. You got Lincoln Kineholtz, who was a 4-star top 100 type of guy in that room. Aaron Noland, a lot of people are excited about him kind of coming in this next season. But here's the thing, maybe except for Aaron Nolan, is Kyle McCord beat all those guys out. He beat him out in the quarterback competition. Now,
Mhm.
Devin Brown, it seems like he's gotten better since time has gone on. We're going to see what he has against Missouri coming up in the Cotton Bowl just before New Year's. But then today, you've got Malik Murphy from Texas enters the transfer portal. He played a little bit when Quinn Ewers was out this season, and he's very talented. But from what I've heard, he's a very raw talent. He needs to be developed, right? He did not play a ton of high school ball. Like, he does not have a ton of experience. He's one of those. He has a lot of God gift ability. That he can just throw out there. We all played with those kids in high school where, whether it's on the field or in the classroom, I don't need to study. I can show up to class. I can get a 98% on the test. We've seen those kinds of kids where they're a star in the football field, but they can just pick up a basketball and average 21 a game, right? Malik Murphy is that kind of guy where hasn't had a ton of experience. He kind of comes in and he learns it really quickly. So, is he a guy, Ohio State? Is that an upgrade necessarily over Kyle McCord and the rest of your quarterback room? It could be. It could also not be. We saw Malik Murphy kind of in spurts this season, not for a ultra extended period of time. You go through a season against Big Ten defenses for 9 games. How does that all play out? But I do see the skill set that matches at Ohio State. I do see the mobility. I do see the down the field passing ability, right? Ohio State, they have, in basketball, you live by the 3, you die by the 3. Sometimes Ohio State, they live by that deep ball, stretching the ball down the field, some of those deep targets. But even this season a little bit, but especially before this season, where that's when they really excel, where they can hit that deep ball down the field. I'm curious to see, because if it's not Malik Murphy, you go in-house. Now, you got some good options. Do you have a home run, can't miss great option? Who knows? That's why this Cotton Bowl is so big. Devin Brown, more mobility, right? They used him in some short yardage run packages this season. That's going to determine a lot. Now, they might have to make a transfer portal decision before then on Malik Murphy or maybe some other guys involved in the portal right now. This thing is ever changing, as we talked about. So that's kind of where it looks at Ohio State next season. I think they came in kind of like you and I thought, where when McCord entered the portal, they would have the pick of the litter. They'd have the Cam Wards, they'd have the Riley Leonards, they'd have the Will Rogers, they'd have the Dylan Gabe, they'd have everybody knocking at their door. They'd have everybody coming to Columbus, Ohio and say, please let me be the quarterback. But Oregon's pretty good. Washington's pretty good. These are NIL down at Miami is real good. Speaking of Ohio State, ask Justin Scott, the defensive lineman that flipped over there, and in his commitment picture, he literally has a stack of cash in there. So Miami has some dollars to throw around, and that's another big part of this. Ohio State, are they pushing NIL as much as they should? Maybe they need to just put a little bit more juice into that department. But that's one domino here in the Big Ten that I'm very curious to see how it's going to fall.
It's funny, Ohio State obviously is, the top pedestal, I guess you can talk about when it comes to, the top domino falling. And then you see their arch rival, Michigan. I think only one guy has transferred out, and I don't think he's really a player of note. I'm not trying to mean any disrespect.
Yeah, CJ Stokes, yeah.
Yeah, it's I don't think the people I've talked to, they haven't heard feedback from JJ McCarthy and whether he's going to be back next year or not. Do you think that it's a risky move on their end to not possibly pursue a guy, who can come in next year? Michigan, for the most part, is going to be rebuilding a little bit next year. They're a very senior laden team this year, and you kind of expect to maybe fall back to the 10 wins, especially with the much more difficult schedule that they have in particular next season. What would you do with their quarterback situation? Do you just ride it out with McCarthy and then try to scramble if he decides to declare, or ...
There were rumblings of Dante Moore. Dante Moore is originally from the state of Michigan. Dante Moore has said multiple times, hey, I want to go to a place where I can be developed, that maybe Dante Moore could transfer in, sit a year, behind JJ McCarthy. If JJ McCarthy goes, then he can just slide it right in to that quarterback role. Michigan's an interesting one, and we talked about the college football calendar and how maybe it has some advantages and some negatives. This is a negative if you're in a playoff game, because if you're in a playoff game, nobody's going to transfer out, right? You don't really have a gauge. If Michigan would have lost to Ohio State and they'd be in the Cotton Bowl like them, we could have already seen the decision on JJ McCarthy. And then Michigan could really be a lot more prepared, maybe be more involved in the transfer portal market. But oh, poor them. They got to play Alabama in the Rose Bowl for a chance to go to the national championship game. This is an interesting one because you got a good quarterback class, I think, in this year's NFL draft with the Caleb Williams of the world and the Drake Mays of the world that are very highly sought after. If JJ stays next year, he can be a Heisman Trophy guy. He can be a really high draft pick. But if he comes out this year, I think he can still be a top 3 rounds type of guy at the bare minimum, right? Some people even mention him in the first round, maybe later, right, towards the bottom of the first round, but people have kind of talked him in there. So if it's not Dante Moore, and there's a lot of steam and a lot of smoke right now for Dante Moore going back to Oregon, kind of completing that arc that he really stayed at. If that indeed happens, which I will say, good move for Dante, 1 year behind Dillon Gabriel, back in a system that you know and you wanted to go to originally, I think is a good thing. But so Michigan, right? If it's not J.J. McCarthy, who's their backup? Former Indiana quarterback Jack Tuttle. He's out of eligibility. So then you get down to Alex Orji, was kind of used in some run packages this season. You got a high 4-star quarterback, Mr. Football in the state of North Carolina in Jaden Davis. We're talking true freshman, right? Okay. Nebraska might be putting all their chips in there, but at a place like Michigan, you don't start a true freshman quarterback. It's just, he's going to be good eventually, right, if things work out. But this is the conundrum. This is the pickle that Michigan and Jim Harbaugh are in. And then you got all of this, and then you've got multiple NCAA investigations hanging over your head. What's Jim Harbaugh's future going to be? There are so many questions surrounding this program. I can almost guarantee you that they are laser focused on the Rose Bowl. They are laser focused on Alabama, and they're probably not thinking much about 2024, right? That they probably know, we got to play the 3 good West Coast schools next year. Okay, we got to play Texas out of conference. We know, Corum's not going to be there. Roman Wilson's not going to be there. All these guys, they're not going to be around. So they know it's all in this year. And like I said, the NCAA investigation has something to do with that. I even said at the beginning of the year, it just seemed at the beginning with all of these seniors, Blake Corum coming back, some of these offensive linemen that could have went pro are coming back. This was the last dance from the very start. Jim Harbaugh flirting with the Vikings 2 years ago, flirting with the Broncos last season. It just seemed like this was it. Okay, and they're going to take a little bit of a step down next season. And boy, as it pertains to this team, yeah, it's I could very well see if they don't get a transfer quarterback, and if they kind of stay with the status quo like I expect to happen, you're probably going to take a dip for a couple of years, because they had some good recruiting this year. Jordan Marshall, a really good running back, is coming in there as well with Jaden Davis. They've done well on the recruiting front here. They don't have to worry about that. But with the Harbaugh leaving and all this stuff, I could very well see the Wolverines taking a little bit of a dip for a couple of years, especially considering what is going to be in the Big Ten. But that's certainly something to watch out for.
Something not taking a dip, in fact, the opposite, is basically the quarterback rooms of almost every team in the Big Ten. I mean, we talked about Dillon Gabriel already committing to Oregon. Will Rogers is visiting Washington, I believe, this weekend, and there's word out there that that's just a match. Just it's a matter of time before he commits there.
Yep.
You have Dylan Raiola, presumably about to be the quarterback in Nebraska. As you mentioned, Kyle McCord possibly moving a little east to Rutgers. There's going to be a lot of good quarterbacks in the Big Ten next year. This is not something, as a lifelong Big Ten watcher, that I'm kind of used to. It's one of those.
I know where you're going with this.
It's just like I don't know what to do with my hands. From Talladega Nights. It's one of those where, but it's kind of the influence of those teams from the West moving in here. Like the Big Ten that we've kind of grown old with and gotten accustomed to it's going to be reinvigorated, and there's going to be a lot of
Yep.
adapting to do. And, it's just, I think the future of the Big Ten Conference is as bright as it's ever been.
Oh, absolutely. I posted this. This was the same tweet that I talked about my transfer portal predictions, and I had Gabriel going to Oregon, right, 1 for 1 so far. Cam Ward still on the board. I had Will Rogers to Washington, and go look it up for the rest. And then at the end of the tweet, I'm like, as a 20-plus year Big Ten fan and watcher, I'm not sure if I can handle all of this quarterback talent. This is an off-season project for me. But and we'll see on the portal if we get chalk, if we get Will Howard to USC, if we get Will Rogers to Washington, and kind of some of these other things go as we expect them to. I'm gonna do some digging in the from the BTT research department. And when is the last time we've had this type of quarterback talent in this league? I'm off the top of my head, I can't think of. If you look at Gabriel, great, right? He was a top 10 in all statistical categories this season. You look at Will Rogers, what he did under Mike Leach, right, in those 2021 and 2022. Put up big numbers in the air raid. You're going to have an offense, I think, that fits more to him over there with Washington and Ryan Grubb, Will Howard, right? Heck, I could throw for 20 touchdowns under Lincoln Riley, right? Yeah, at USC. Like, you put a most capable quarterback into that USC system, it's gonna end up good. Yeah, and then you look at Drew Aller coming back to Penn State with one of the more dynamic offensive coordinators in college football coming over to Happy Valley. Like, you've got a lot. You've got Dylan Raiola. We mentioned him at
JJ
Nebraska.
possibly
Like
coming back.
JJ McCarthy. Like, yeah, there's a lot here. And that's something I'm very curious to kind of go back and look at when it comes to quarterbacks. Off the top of my head, I can't think of anything that's been that stacked. And as you mentioned, it's the West Coast schools, right? You look at USC historically, like you go back to Carson Palmer, you go back to Matt Leinart, and you go to Matt Barkley, you go to some of these other guys that they've had throughout the years. And then you combine that history at USC with what Lincoln Riley has done at Oklahoma. And, that speaks for itself. Look at Oregon. Okay, maybe it's not the same type of pocket type of passer quarterback that you see at USC, but look what just happened the last 2 years with Bo Nix. And then you can go even further back than that. They've had some great quarterbacks in the Chip Kelly era as well. Washington, when they made the playoff, right? 2016, Jake Browning, who just got an NFL start. He was the quarterback there. And of course, with Michael Penix Jr. these last 2 years, if they get Will Rogers, I said this earlier in the show, people are going to have to come together. Like the Iowas of the world, I know they're an easy target. I know it's low-hanging fruit, but it's reality. It's reality. Okay, they're used to playing these teams. 6 out of the 9 games they play these West Division teams. For those watching on video, now they're playing Oregon. Now they're playing USC. Now they're playing Washington. They're playing Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, and teams like that. A lot more. Adapt or die. That's the phrase with this conference. Okay, that's going to be a clash of styles next season, and this is one of the most anticipated seasons I think that I've looked to in recent memory because of the clash of styles. All the fans out west are saying we're going to come in here and we're going to drop 50 on you every week. But then the fans in their current Big Ten footprint are be like, have you seen Big Ten defenses? We don't know unless they match up against each other. Right. And I can't wait for some of these matchups. I know some of the tradition of this conference in college football is kind of being pushed to the side for TV revenue and all that. But the suits, as much as maybe sometimes we don't like them, getting these types of matchups inside this conference, there's going to be a lot of people watching, and they're getting exactly what they want. They're getting a whole lot of interest, and there's going to be a whole lot of interest with these types of matchups and these quarterbacks coming into this conference.
So before I head you on, Ted, I asked the folks if anyone had any questions for you. And this is not really a question, but it perfectly leads into my last question for today. And Jake Sumaraj, at Astros Jake on Twitter, or X, whatever you'd like to call it, said, college football is the only sport where some teams have an absolute war chest to build a roster, while other teams have relatively nothing. and they're expected to compete at the same level. It's designed to only benefit those at the top. It's not like we're even playing the same sport. Now, for me, as some of you know, like I live about 25 minutes west of Chicago. So when comes to my pro sports teams, I'm kind of used to being the guy with the big war chest. We play in one of the biggest media markets, so on the pro side, I'm kind of used to being the big brother who gets to decide whatever he wants to do. Moving forward, as I kind of started off the show with today, is Illinois is, and programs of Illinois' tier, they don't have the NIL money, the funds that the Ohio States, the Michigans, Nebraska has had. Let's be honest. We've been recording now for 50 minutes. Thank you so much for your time.
Yep.
And for the most part, we've been talking about Nebraska, Ohio State, and Michigan. And that's because those are the programs that have the most money and are able to bring in the top talent. Those schools out west, USC has a very rich donor base. They've got a very rabid fan base. Oregon, obviously, they got Phil Knight money. These are three, top 15 programs in the country entering the Big Ten. I guess my question is, for the Illinois, for let's Purdue, let's just say the bottom third of what the Big Ten is going to be moving forward. How do you see, what kind of strategies do you think these sort of teams are going to have to do to adapt? Because they're going to have to adapt in order to survive.
That's absolutely true. We talked about adapt or die just a few minutes ago. And that's another big question, right? We know how USC, Oregon, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, we know how those teams are going to do. They're going to be at the top more often than not. And now these West Division teams, okay, like you said, like you guys, the Illinois, you can throw Iowas and Wisconsins possibly in there as well, right? Purdue's, Northwesterns. Okay, before we got a path, okay, if we beat kind of some like-minded teams kind of within our area, both geographically and talent-wise, we can make it to Indy, and we got a one-shot, who knows, to win the conference. And now that doesn't exist anymore. So let me give you an example. Oh, well, actually, I got two examples. Let's start first with Rutgers. Rutgers, Greg Schiano just got an extension through 2030. And I have seen post after post after post from players at Rutgers. Kyle McCord, Tyrone Powell, Aaron Lewis, some guys that could have went pro, some guys that very easily, Kyle McCord over 1,000 yards on the ground this season, could have very easily, you know what, Rutgers, you can't offer me enough NIL money. I'm going to go into the portal and be one of the most highly sought after running backs in the portal. I could go to wherever. I could go down south in the SEC. I could go wherever, right, and get a lot of money. But I think what Greg Schiano is doing is he's recruiting his type of guys for his program. Coming out of high school, they might not be the most highly rated guys. And he said this in a podcast this offseason with Adam Brenneman. I recommend everybody to kind of go check that one out because I was very intrigued and drawn in when he was talking about guys that fit his program and really what he wants to do. What does Greg Schiano want to do? He wants to be a tough physical team at the line of scrimmage. He wants to run the football. Are they going to throw for a bunch of yards in the season? No, because they're looking for a quarterback right now in the transfer portal to try to fix that problem. Defense, running the football. And you've got guys that could easily have went into the portal, staying in Piscataway, New Jersey. You need to build a culture. You need to build an identity. That's why it's so important for the young coaches of the world, for the Ryan Walters, for I know Rule and Fickle have a year under their belt as well, for Kurt Cignetti over at Indiana, for Jonathan Smith at Michigan State. You got to establish with your kids right away, who are you and why should they stay there until graduation day or until they declare for the NFL draft? Because there are so many more opportunities out there for them. There's so much more money at some of these other places. And it has worked. The model has worked at a few places. Rutgers is one of those places. You got to have these kids feel like they're at home. You gotta sell to these kids that if you stay here, we are going to develop you as good as we can. Like if I am a defensive player, maybe anywhere in the country, but definitely in the Midwest, if I'm a defensive player, no doubt I'm going to Iowa. Is Iowa the place where a 5-star kid looks to all the time? No, it's not. I mean, they've gotten, as time has gone on, they've been able to. Xavier Wampka was a 4-star, I think top 100, top 150 type of guy there. But they get the absolute most out of all of their defensive players at Iowa. Look what they've done the last few years. You could even go further back, ever since Phil Parker has done there. They develop a bunch of NFL players, right? You look at Jack Campbell, and now you look at like Jay Higgins this year, leading tackler in the Big Ten in his first year. Like, you got to go to a place where you're going to get developed, and they have that strong culture. Iowa, right? Iowa's one. Rutgers is one. Now you kind of flow into the back part of that. What happens? How do you prevent an Illinois? How do you prevent a Purdue? How do you prevent a team like that from essentially becoming a AAA program? And it does start with their culture. It does start. I think Brett Bielema, all right, at Illinois. This is an Illinois show. I love Brett Bielema. He was put on this earth to do one thing and one thing only, and coach Big Ten football. I think he has done a really good job with that. Johnny Newton could have easily entered the portal. Could have easily gotten a bunch more money elsewhere. Keith Randolph, probably the same thing. But it didn't happen. I think you need to build that strong culture from day one. And look, you might not be able to recruit the biggest and baddest players, but you need to be able to develop like nobody's business. Like, there's a kid, I'm sure everybody's got their eye on him, Dylan Thieneman over at Purdue. Okay, as a freshman, fantastic. Fantastic, getting all these postseason awards. Good for him. I'm scared for the Boilermakers. I really am. Because that's a kid, they need to build their defense around him. And Ryan Walters and Kevin Kane over there, I feel pretty strongly that they can do that. But I'm worried that after, if he has a really good year next year, that he could end up transferring out. But the disparity is going to be bigger. And the commenter that kind of had the statement before was, and it's a true statement. It's a true statement. It's if you want to compare it, like a lot of professional sports, hockey, the NHL, NFL, they have a hard salary cap, right? So if you're the Dallas Cowboys or if you're the Cincinnati Bengals, everybody's got the same amount of money to bring in on players. Everybody's got an equal opportunity to sign the biggest free agents. It depends how you manage the cap. But I compare college football a little bit to more like baseball. Now, I know that baseball has kind of put in some, if you go over a certain amount, you kind of got to pay back in tax, that luxury tax kind of stuff. Look what just happened. Look what just happened with Shohei Ohtani. The rich get richer, right? Los Angeles Dodgers type of situation. I compare baseball a lot to college football, where Yankees, Red Sox, Cubs, Dodgers, you kind of throw in those teams. And then you kind of look at, I'm from Wisconsin, Milwaukee Brewers, right? What do you need to do? You need to develop players from your farm system, right? And hope they stay. Hope they stay. And have enough money, okay, NIL on the college side of things, have enough money that you're going to invest in that player eventually when it's kind of their time. So they need to get creative. There's a model, because like the Purdue's, the Minnesotas, you could, like PJ Fleck, he is begging and begging and begging. NIL. If we want to keep Darius Taylor, we need cash from the Dinkytown Athletes Collective. Now they got their cash. He's coming back, but is that going to happen with every single player? I don't know. You need a good culture. You need a really good culture in place, and you need a clear vision.
Ted, I think you basically nailed exactly what I was going to say myself. Speaking from the Illinois perspective, ever since Brett took over, we haven't really had anyone leave the program who we're in too much tears over. And
Right.
it's kind of, because of what you said, because of the culture that Brett Bielema has built at Illinois. Like you said, Jason Newton, he could have gone anywhere last offseason. He could have gone to the NFL. What he
Yeah.
did is he trusted Brett and the staff to develop him so that he could, slot higher in the first round of the NFL draft. And from the looks of it, that's exactly what's going to happen. Um, Illinois' NIL situation is, and it's pretty much out there that Brett tries to. We don't necessarily have the funds to. Let me rephrase this differently. Because our funds are limited, we try to keep our NIL for the guys in the locker room.
Yeah.
We try to,
Right.
both law firm members talked about how they had offers to make more money at different schools, but
Mm-hmm.
they stuck around because they believed in the development that they were getting in that locker room. They genuinely believed that Brett and the staff could, make them a more complete, a better player for the NFL draft. A lot of folks, are kind of complaining that Illinois is kind of focused on the JUCO level, or the low 3-star level, the guys who can't make it at Auburn, and those are the talents that we're bringing in. But then you take a look at our offensive lineman, Isaiah Adams. He was a JUCO transfer 2 years ago. This year, one of the best offensive linemen in the Big
Mm-hmm.
Ten, and he's going to be drafted in the NFL.
Yep.
These are kind of the stories that Brett has to continue to pitch. We need to. I think bowl games are going to be super important moving forward. Getting those
Yes.
6-7 wins, so that just we, as long as we can prove that we can compete on the football field, we're going to be continue to taking on those developmental projects. But then once we have some success and start throwing these guys to the NFL, that's when I think we'll be able to get more of the 4 stars, the higher 4 stars, and maybe at that point try to reach the next year. Right now, we just need to survive, in
Yep.
my opinion.
Well, that's the thing. You mentioned, so you bring up some good points, and you mentioned some good things as well. And those teams in the West, the Purdue, Illinois, you could even talk about some of the top teams in that division, like Wisconsin and Iowa. You need to adjust your expectations. All right, it's just the fact of the matter. Okay, you don't have a clear path to the Big Ten title game anymore. Even if it were 14 teams, these 14 right here for those of you on video, and there was no East and there was no West, it would still be an extremely difficult path for those teams in the West, with Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State right at the top. Now you throw in Oregon and Washington. Washington's a playoff team. Oregon's right there. USC will be there. Trust me, they have the backing. They're going to make it work. It's going to be extremely tough. Like for Iowa, for example, right? And I'm from Wisconsin, so I'm a Badger fan a little bit as well. We had expectations where we could win 9 games, 10 games. Badger teams won 11 games, and made it into the Big Ten title game. And though that's maybe for those programs what they expected. Hey, we need to get to the 9-10 win level. Now it might be 7 or 8, right? Considering who's in your conference and how the scheduling arrangement is going to work down going forward. Who knows? 2 or 3 years, you might have Miami and Florida State. Okay, this thing ain't stopping.
Mm-hmm.
This train ain't stopping. I hate to say that in an Illinois podcast because that's a Purdue thing, but but you get the general idea. Like this, there's more money. There's more TV revenue to be brought in with brands like Notre Dame still out there. Who knows what happens in 5 years when the ACC could come crumbling down, and you've got one team alone that could maybe increase your TV revenue by almost double. Right? So this is not getting any easier right now for some of these teams at the bottom. So adjusting expectations and realizing it's not so much now as, well, we got to make the Big Ten title game. What do we have to do to have that one really good season where we can get into the top 10 in the country to possibly get us an at-large berth into the college football playoff? And then once we're in, let's see what happens. Right? And now it's like everything's going NFL style. And now, like the NFL, you're getting hot at the right time, right? My hometown team, the Green Bay Packers, prior to losing to the Italians, the New York Giants the other night, they were a team that was getting hot. And believe me, I know, 2010.
Led by Illini quarterback Tommy DeVito.
Exactly.
We got a name drop here. Yeah.
But I remember back in 2010, when the Packers got hot at the end of the season, they had to go on the road for every single playoff game. And they got hot at the end of the year, and they rode it all the way to the Super Bowl and won the title that year. So that's kind of what you're going to see, is who can get hot at the right time, who can have 2 losses, who can have 3 losses. Now, it pays in many different ways to be in the Big Ten, because the Big Ten and the SEC, no doubt, clear, that's your tier 1. It's a power 2. People are going to say power 4. Don't believe them. It's power 2. Okay, there is a clear resources advantage. I think you're really going to see it when these 2 TV deals, the SEC and the Big Ten deals, once they get to like 2026, 2027, in the middle of the deals when they're both making around 100 million a year, that's when you're really going to see it. Because the Big 12 and the ACC, they're at a different level. Why do you think Florida State's trying to get out of the conference? Because they're a team that, let's call it as it is, should be in the college football playoff, a 13-0 team, and now, wait a minute, Purdue's making 100 million and I'm making 35? Well, that's not going to fly. We're Florida State. We're Miami, maybe a little bit of a lesser level. Notre Dame has never really been worried about money. But that's a good thing for a school like an Illinois, like a Purdue, like a Minnesota. You're in the room. You're at the table. At the very least, you have the resources. And then you got to keep an eye on the future. This NCAA proposal from Charlie Baker, right, at the beginning of last week, where maybe NIL comes in-house, right, and everybody kind of has for half of the athletes within the athletic program, you would have to offer a $30,000 baseline. Maybe it levels the playing field a little bit, right? If you have that just a little bit and you can bring things in-house. I think the leaders, NCAA and some of these conferences, they're looking for ways to level the playing field a little bit. That's why you said you just got to hang on for a couple of years. And maybe in 2 or 3 years, we'll have federal NIL legislation. And at that point, the playing field is leveled a little bit. I think that's what people want. Even the power players in the league see that and see that leveling the playing field is gonna make things even. It's actually gonna help them right a little bit as well. So just hang on, like that. I guess that would be my message to some of these programs. Right, know your culture, develop, and hang on for dear life to see if you can get to that point in a couple of years where they figure this thing out. Now all of a sudden we're on the same page and on the same level.
All right, Ted, speaking of adjusting your expectations, if you're a first-time viewer of the Illinicast, not all our shows are this informative and this great.
Kind of went
Big
off there for a
thank
while,
you.
didn't I?
No, it's all good. Thank you so much, Ted, for joining me today. I think, we had some very decent conversation. We went way longer than I was projecting us to go. And, I apologize that we only talked about Ohio State, Michigan, Nebraska. If you're a watcher, a subscriber, and you support a different team, let me know in the comments. And I promise I'll have some content geared towards you guys moving forward because we're just here, to provide the viewers what they want. Ted, if you don't mind, can you let the audience know where they can find you?
Yeah, on Twitter, at Big Ten Ted, BigTenTed over there on Twitter, also on YouTube. Type it in. It'll probably be one of the first things that kind of pops up as well. Got a lot of video. There's a lot of content here coming down the pike with uploaded videos. I try to go live once or twice every week. Kind of depends on the schedule. Got bowl previews coming up as well. So it's a busy time. Kind of over at the channel. So excited for all the stuff. Excited for all the support that's been given this year, and I'm just excited about December. Man, it's a big time of year for any fan, right? Before you had to wait until signing day. Now, like at a school like Illinois or some of these other schools, Michigan State is kind of one that's like, man, we got a new coach. We're gonna get a great quarterback. Man, I'm excited. Oh, wait, I got to wait 9-10 months until we play another football game. So a lot of excitement in the conference, a lot of excitement on the channel. So, yeah, it's going to be a good December.
I also want to mention that Ted has a new Discord. If you enjoy
Yes.
talking Big Ten football, I'll post a link in the description of this video. Don't let me be the only Illinois guy out there. Come on, let's show some numbers out there. But yeah, please follow Ted. Ted's top notch when it comes to Big Ten focused content out there. And as I said at the beginning of the channel, if you don't mind, please give us a like, subscribe. We're trying to throw out as much content for you as possible. And that's it for now. Ted, thank you again. And we will see you all later.